pre-show. Yeah. Okay.
Our first to your who everyone wants to be on TV, and here we are. I mean, I certainly do. No, thanks a lot, Carol, because this is our first, YouTube live stream with video. It's going to really open things up for Seward Soundwords, I think. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can get it to work.
And then the pastel class is every Tuesday at noon or 1 that you do?
1 o'clock until about 3:30 is pastel class at the Senior Center. On Mondays at the Senior Center, we have music. We have musicians that come in, and we old gals get to sing.
Every Monday, and then every Tuesday your pastels. Yeah. Every other Wednesday. Man, what a happening place!
It's a happening place,
lunch
and
is fantastic
exercise.
these days.
Oh, pork pine today.
I gotta do that on Wednesday.
Yeah,
and that is open to the public. All this stuff, of course. Your pastel class. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna sit in one of those.
It doesn't say. I don't know. I'll have to. Can I check it on here somehow? What if this will be back? Oh, here we go. Oops, that's not what I intended. There we go.
Wolf Kurtz on production, folks.
Yeah,
on the spot.
Trying.
We wing it around here, yet it's very professional. So we kind of
Kurtz on production, folks. Yeah, on the spot. Trying. We went. Well, okay, yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think you're good to go.
Okay.
We got 4 minutes until the top of the hour, but you can start any time. This is kind of the first go.
Well, I got fans who were at 6.
They're all.
They're planning at 6, finishing dinner, and
if I knew how to read this dashboard, I could probably tell you how many people are watching already.
Oh, don't
Does
do
that. Anybody here have any idea what the weather's going to be like going up to Anchorage on Wednesday?
It should be after the storm.
Back tomorrow,
right?
Good. It's going to be stormy tomorrow.
Yeah. That's what I was hoping.
So whatever, yeah. So we'll see. I haven't really checked out the storm. I saw it come across, and so I haven't evaluated their prediction yet. So
yeah,
you got to wait for me because I know.
That's I figured. I thought, ask the man.
Yeah. Use the resources.
Okay, so I'm going to duck outside and see if I can find this thing on my phone.
Okay.
And I'll keep tabs on you guys, but
we can start
take off whenever.
Okay. Yeah. And then you got the recording for the radio as well, like for later playing it?
Yeah, I'm doing the audio.
Same.
Separate.
Okay. That'll work for that.
Yep.
So we're all set.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Cool. Oh, all right. I just got the confirmation, actually.
I can see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Welcome to Seward Soundwords. Local writers reading their work live on the air, and welcome here on our first YouTube live stream of Seward Soundwords. Thank you for joining us via that route. I'm your host, Sean Ullman, and very special guest tonight sitting next to me is Carol Souza. Carol, thanks for doing the show. How are you?
I am just fine, and I'm really happy to be here.
Wonderful. That's how we want our guests to arrive. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm excited for your set. Carol's always the closer when we do readings often at our literary events. She goes last. First time was maybe just kind of by accident. I don't think so, though. It's been intentional from there because we want people leaving the event as Carol as their last experience, because you're leaving on a high note, and you're laughing, you're just feeling great because she can bring the comedy, she can do it all. So you're the closer tonight. You're also the opener. You're the whole show.
I'm the show.
So
yes.
Yeah, thank you. I met Carol at the Senior Center, Writers Group, which goes back, I would think we're coming on 8 or 9 years. We've been doing this every 2 weeks. Carol teaches a pastel class that I'm sure has many years as well, going on at the Senior Center. And that is every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So you can hang out with Carol at the Senior Center and do pastel. She is a pro at that as well. And it's always really fun to hang out with Carol. I always enjoy spending time with you and listening to your stories. You've got some great ones and a great way of telling. So I'm really excited for tonight. A lot of you here in Seward would know Carol, of course, as Weezen Greens. She has her greenhouse set up out in Camelot. She's been doing this since 2000. And I know it's a great place for me to go regularly for my starts, and purple potatoes and marigolds, flowers. And we're really lucky to have you here, with a local connection to all these happy vegetables and flowers starts. So thank you so much for all your hard work. I know you love it, but that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
I've lived in Seward for 48 years, I think. So you manage to do a lot of things if you stay in one place long enough.
Right. And I think that's part of, your stories, what you bring, why, because you get the history. I mean, we arrived, we talk about Board Feet Lumber, which was right next door, which we'll get into later, because I'm talking too much. Ladies and gentlemen, Carol Souza.
Okay. I guess we're going to introduce this.
Yeah, maybe a little something.
Okay.
Not that it needs it.
Well, this was for a circ reading at the Cookery, wasn't it?
Yeah, back
years ago.
2016.
Yes, on November 7th, I think it was,
Right.
or something like that. Anyway, I didn't know what to write about, and I knew I had a lot of great writers there that I needed to compete with to not embarrass myself. So I tried to come up with some idea that would be different. And as I had just had my septic tank pumped that day, I decided maybe that would be a good place to start. So, but it's not a very interesting subject, so I embellished. So this was actually called embellishment. It's a quiet morning just above freezing. Due to the time change, it's still dark out there, but with enough breeze to create a response from the many chimes on my porch. My fingers are poised on the keyboard, ready to write something worthy of reading aloud to fellow writers. At 69, life is rather mundane. Little happens of interest to others, so I have to think. You may consider this an unworthy topic, and of course it is, but with a little embellishment, I hope to entertain. Here goes. Last week, the pumper truck came by to suck the waste from my septic tank. When he came in, he remarked that upon lifting the lid, the lovely fragrance of baked oatmeal cookies emanated from my tank. I told him anyone can improve the smell of their waste by eating oatmeal each morning and ingesting a teaspoon of vanilla every day. I failed to mention to him that this oatmeal phenomenon is actually a genetic characteristic I am privileged to carry. In fact, it is difficult to tell which came first, the aromatic byproduct or the oatmeal cookie. Or, last week, the pumper truck came by and sucked the waste out of my septic tank. When he came in, he was shaking with excitement. His hose had been jammed by a large halibut that was flopping around at the bottom of my tank. I could only assume that the freezer-burned halibut I had flushed down my toilet had been filled with eggs that, once in an environment familiar to all bottom feeders, the eggs hatched. Of course, the fish was too large to be extracted through the small access pipe, so he is still down there as the pumper operator left 2 feet of sludge, a courtesy to the halibut. I can assume that this great fish will live to his 50 years of life alone in my tank long after I'm gone. Oh, well, there's little I can do about it, but I plan to wait longer to have my tank sumped. Halibut, after all, are bottom feeders. Or, last week, the pumper truck came to suck the waste from my septic tank. When the driver brought in my bill, he claimed to have sumped 2,000 gallons from my 1,000-gallon tank. I argued the point, suggesting he'd pumped someone else's tank prior to mine and forgot to reset the meter. But he assured me I was his first stop. Convinced that my tank was taking on groundwater, I hired my neighbor and his backhoe to dig up the tank. To our surprise, a second access had been installed, and that access was traced back to my neighbor's tank. It seemed he'd been piggybacking me for years. Always a quiet, unassuming man, I was surprised to find that he would be capable of such theft, so I walked over to his cabin to call him out on it. It took him a while to answer the door. I heard muffled whimpers and harsh words, causing me to step away and peer cautiously into his window. Inside, I saw a lovely young woman chained to his wall, scantily clad, mouth taped shut. I scurried home to call the authorities, who arrived in record time. Back home, I plopped into my chair, still in shock. I considered myself the hero of the day until an enraged woman, bits of tape still stuck to her cheek, banged on my door and demanded I stay off her husband's property and stay out of their private lives. Now I just let the septic people pump 2,000 gallons at a whack, too embarrassed to talk to my neighbor. Or last week, the pumper truck came to suck the waste from my septic tank. I did not recognize the driver. He was tall and silver-haired, probably a robust 70-year-old man. I watched from the window as he uncoiled the hose from the truck. The exertion must have been remarkable because he removed first his jacket, then his shirt. To my surprise, his muscled torso was tanned from his many pumpings in the summer. Tufts of soft silver chest hair danced in the breeze as the hose he'd inserted into my tank emitted a steady chugada, chugada, chugada. As he recoiled his hose and slipped back into his shirt and jacket, I scurried away from the window and searched for my checkbook. The bill was $475. I gave him $575. I wanted the experience to be good for him as it was for me. My receipt indicates the driver's name is Lance. I plan to schedule another pumping next month and ask just for him by name. Okay, so any of these stories might be more interesting than the mundane experience I actually had, but you never know when a true adventure might happen, even at my age. Isn't life something?
Get it? Something.
You have to see the something, yeah.
Oh, love that one. So good. So you journal like every day. And so
Yes.
this was you had an assignment. You were going to contribute in this reading, and it's like I got to
Mhm.
cook something up here.
Yeah.
So did the septic tanks, did the pumper truck, was that in your journal? It's just kind of like a mundane, this happened today, and then you
Yeah, it happened that day or the day before, I don't recall. Yeah.
right.
I just was looking for something to write about. And when I write, I sit down and I start writing.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of editing and I don't do a lot of planning. So you get these meandering things like this,
Right.
you know. So once I get a subject in mind, it may start out one way and then go to something else.
You can run with it. Yeah, you
Yes.
have like this. This is a theme, I think, in your work of like taking something ordinary and then giving it a twist. Your imagination can kick in and you make it more interesting. I think listeners and viewers, you'll see that in these next two pieces as well.
Well, obviously this was all fiction, except the halibut. The halibut was true. Yeah.
Bottom feeders.
The bottom feeders. Yeah.
The eggs. Freezer burn, halibut, a huge fish down the toilet. Yeah, I could see that. I love the neighbor stealing,
Yeah. And then,
that's probably something people
after
could
having
figure out.
interfered in his personal business,
Right.
I just went ahead and paid for the 2,000 gallons
Yeah,
after
we're not
that.
gonna-
We're not going to go
That
back
might have
there.
been part of his whole
Yeah.
plan there. Well, she's
Yeah.
not going to bug us
Yeah.
after she's this.
Okay. Do you want me to start another or?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. This one is back from 2018 and it's called Faking It. Everyone seems to be both weary and wary of the news today. We all have our favorite sources, most of them leaning in whatever direction we find most favorable. My neighbor says all the major news channels are fake news, so he gets all his info from YouTube. Most of these videos involve tiny robots injected under our skin or how to survive a zombie apocalypse, so I tend to disagree with him. But we all have the right to believe what we want to believe. Nobody wants fake news, but we can't agree which news is fake. For weeks, I've been wondering if I could create my own fake news, just weave it around my life like it's real and see who believes it. I thought you folks would be a good place to start. So here goes. Yes, we're having a repetition of style here, aren't we?
Yeah, this was at another reading that
Yes,
you prepared
yes,
for.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. I noticed an attendant is kind of sparse down at the senior center, or attendance is kind of sparse down at the senior center. Most of our regulars are out of state enjoying a warmer climate. I stay here year round, not by choice, but well, I shouldn't be telling you this, but you look like nice folks. And what would I say? What would you say if I told you I'm here on the Federal Witness Protection Program? I arrived here in 1974 amid the Watergate scandal, if you catch my drift. Posing as a wife and mother in a small Alaskan town after living a life of glamour in D.C. can be a challenge. But even a high-priced hooker can find happiness in the arms of a Watergate janitor when neither of them will live another day if discovered by the wrong people. And when children are relocated at a young age, they have no memory of the life in the nation's capital or visits from daddy. Jack Kennedy was a man of passion, but that's another story. Of course, I could be lying, but it could be true. I don't know, but it could. What do you think? Most people think we senior citizens live dull lives, but you wouldn't believe the stuff that goes on at our social club, the senior center. One old geezer went in for cataract surgery, but some folks think that he was just a cover for his real surgery. He pretty much stays to himself and doesn't say much, but a friend of mine said he sat next to him at foot care, and both of them ankle deep in soaky water, and he noticed his toenails were painted pink with a rhinestone on his pinky toe. She thinks his surgery is quite a bit south of his eyeballs, and she's usually a pretty good source of information. I can't confirm what she says, but it could be true. I don't know it, but it could. What do you think? Fortunately for him or her, other big news was buzzing around the lunch table all week, so toenails were not a main topic. We seem to have a couple of lovebirds at the center, and they've been roosted out of the exercise room a couple of times, and boy, they were sweaty. But they weren't wearing tennis shoes. Their story is that they were offering each other counsel, but you don't have to untuck your shirt to offer advice. Another of my friends, always a reliable source, says wedding bells are in the offing, but the potential groom is not too happy because his intended has a bun in the oven. Seems she's been taking hormones, fully intending to entrap him with a love child. I'm not sure how old either of these people are, but you got to be 60 to even get in the door at the center. So that kid is going to be a Social Security baby when he pops out of the chute. Of course, maybe that's fake news, but I've seen them giving each other the look. And so it could be true. I don't know, but it could. What do you think? No one was more surprised than me to hear that our chef has been lacing our lunches with marijuana. He says it's parsley, but you have to admit it might account for the pink toenails and the activity in the exercise room. In that case, these seniors are not deviants, but simple pawns in a greater plot to manipulate us old duffers like a madman's puppets. Lunch attendance has sure picked up, and some of the folks who usually spend all winter down south are coming back early. Words sure get around. I have noticed I've been asking for second helpings and humming old 60s tunes. I suppose my source may be wrong, but it could be true. I don't know, but it could. What do you think? One of our senior friends asked me for a ride to the center today. I asked her why she wasn't taking the senior van. Her usual mode of transportation, and she told me the driver's been revving up the engine and whipping around town like she's at the Daytona 500. Rumor has it that the driver took the van home and her husband's auto shop, and over the weekend installed some fire-breathing engine, so she has more time to sit down for lunch and enjoy the parsley. I don't ride the bus, so I'm not sure what to think about this one. But my friend's pretty observant, and it could be true. I don't know, but it could. What do you think? My best friend down at the center has accused me of spreading tall tales, and she must think I've had a stroke and I can't see through her motives. I think she may be dealing parsley to the chef, so she wants me to clam up so she doesn't end up in the slammer. I have to admit, my mouth has been drooping on one side and I can't remember anybody's name, but I think I'm fine. I don't know. It could be. I don't know. What do you think?
Nice. What a concept. Oh, man. the jokes are there, you know, like, so when you had this idea, oh, fake news, senior center, like, did that all come pretty quick? Like, you knew you had something that was going to really work, and then all those scenarios in one go, one sitting, or did you kind of walk around with that one a little bit?
Oh no, I just sat down and started writing whatever fell out of my head into the computer, which is sometimes some of the stuff I say is a little strange, a little off color, maybe.
A little awesome.
Well,
that's typically how you go. It's like one shoot. Like you
Yeah.
just like journal, you sit, like you're not adding to a piece later on when you're gardening. You might get an idea then, but you sit, write the piece is done, more or less.
It's not that I get an idea for a piece. It's more like I was fuming about trying to watch the news and get some actual information.
Right.
And I was just getting editorial stuff. And of course, everybody was, there was the big, at that time, 2018.
Yeah, we were right in it.
Yeah, we were right in it. So that's why I thought, well, okay, let's see if I can do it.
Yeah.
So I just started writing.
Yeah. And some of that stuff, you it gets a little crazy. Like, okay, definitely not, but just.
What, you don't think that anybody's having an affair?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, circling back to the parsley, like you have these writerly moves too that are just go to where you get the parsley back in there, and like
you've always got to feed it back in. Yeah. If you're doing a pastel and you put a little yellow down in this corner, you better put a little yellow up on the other opposite corner up on top to balance it out. So you've always got to pull something back in, or it's just out there hanging,
Yeah. Love it. Great connection. I was going to ask you about that. So thank you. All right.
Okay.
Oh, let me say that thank you all here for joining us on our first live stream on YouTube of Seward Soundwords. And, thank you to our listeners on local radio station 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. Tonight, there's a special council meeting going on right now. You can listen to that on 91.7. You can actually have both these programs going on. You might need to kind of divide your listening a little bit. And then we will play this episode of Seward Soundwords on the radio locally at a future time, probably in the Monday 6 p.m. slot. This will be a Weezen Green's evergreen, as they say. Evergreen is a term for like a one you got in the can.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So want to get the call out there to 91.7 KIBH FM Seward, our home station. Thank you all for listening. Carol Souza has got more for your entertainment. Thank you, Carol.
Okay. This one is called Virtue versus Opportunity from the Senior Perspective. This was also in 2018. The background of this is that sometimes I find people that feel the most virtuous are not ever tested. Right. So if you're never tested, how virtuous are you?
Yeah.
If you are a rock star and you're monogamous, that's pretty virtuous.
Oh, yeah.
You've been tested. Opportunity.
Yeah.
So that was the name. Versus
another neat concept.
Virtue versus opportunity. Salacious news and a bad knee have kept me glued to my TV screen lately. Porn stars and an ice pack. That's my life these days. So over time, I've come to understand that a celebrity titanium knee and a big bank account has much better chance of being salacious, while an old lady in a recliner has a better chance of remaining chaste. Of course, by the time one reaches his or her 70s, salacious behavior is most likely in the rearview mirror. But it got me to thinking. Virtue is directly related to opportunity. Young, beautiful, or rich, or any combination of the three equals opportunity. But who am I, old, fat, and poor, to feel more virtuous? In other words, it is much easier to be virtuous when nobody asks you to do otherwise. Where's that senior passion? I'll tell you where. It fell by the wayside when opportunity began to fade. I've considered writing a story about a steamy encounter between two seniors in the 70s, living on low income and low expectations. In their 70s, not on the 70s. Not the usual December romance story, but rather raw and uncontrollable desire, slaked in elevators, food banks, or on dialysis couches. Of course, it will be a work of fiction, but it has possibilities. So, like any smut novel, I need steamy characters and a marginal plot line. It's been years since I've read one of those sexy romance novels, but as I recall, it starts with a steamy encounter, followed by a big misunderstanding, followed by a lot of sexual tension. I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, yada, yada, yada. And you've spent an entire day reading this crap and haven't thawed anything for dinner. That's what I want to write. A story so steamy and fascinating that you forgot to thaw meat for dinner. But I want the characters to be over 70 years of age. I've always liked a challenge. For the female interest, I've created Patsy, a hippie type in her youth, having spent time in communes baking wheat bread in nothing but an apron and dallying with all the young men. She's a woman of the world who is forced to move in with her daughter when financial circumstances force her from her little apartment. The male interest is Jim. He lives alone. He has for years after a bitter divorce from his spiteful wife. He spends time in the park playing checkers and sleeps in the back room of a diner where he works as a dishwasher. The two could meet when Patsy goes in the diner with her daughter, and Jim, who is bussing tables, spills coffee on Patsy's ample chest and attempts to mop it up with his bare hands. Patsy's daughter is appalled. Patsy is intrigued. As the diner is just down the street, Patsy begins dropping by for coffee, and Jim keeps spilling it, each time lower and lower and lower. You get the idea. One evening after closing, Jim takes Patsy back to his little cot and reminds her what happens to virtue when opportunity arises. And to Patsy's surprise, it arises. Trouble rears its ugly head when Patsy confides to an old friend, Anne. And to her surprise, the next time Patsy goes to the diner, there is Anne in Patsy's favorite booth, chest covered in coffee, and Jim mopping with an enthusiasm he never shared with Patsy. He tries to explain. She exits, vowing to never return. And the next chapter or two is the I love you, I hate you stuff. That then Jim ends up in the hospital, suffering from a bad coffee burn to his frontal nether regions. Patsy digs in her purse for a senior taxi voucher and rushes to the hospital, where Jim explains that he spurned Anne's advances and she doused him in hot coffee. Of course, there is a smooching, but then they took Jim's dentures at the hospital and hazard bagged him with his clothes. So Patsy feels like she's kissing an overripe papaya, but she always liked papaya. And as you recall, this is a low expectation character. Of course, the sexual tension continues while Jim heals. But by the end of the novel, all is well, and Jim is fully restored, except for the Brazilian wax they gave him in the hospital. Patsy gets a cashier's job at the diner, and they find a double mattress at the thrift store that just fits in that little room in the back. As it also serves as a food pantry, Pete, the owner, has asked them to postpone all their steamy activities until the diner is closed, and Pete has locked up and is far enough down the street that he cannot hear Patsy howling like an opera star. In the final scene, Pete locks the front door and starts down the street. Just as he disappears, a strange aria begins, accompanied by the squeaking of a second-hand mattress. The end. Okay, so it may not be a bestseller, but all I hope is that for some of you will read it and forget to thaw meat for dinner. The older I get, the lower my expectations, the lesser my opportunities, but the greater my virtue.
Thank you, Carol. Another in your classic hits album. I mean, this one, so much that I enjoy. So first of all, the seniors subject and senior center, these details are so rich. The taxi vouchers, hazard bag, the dentures. I mean, I think you need to write more of these. Not necessarily a novel. I mean, I love what you did here. I mean, I would take a novel for sure. I think that's there. But I love this concept of like, you've always wanted to write a novel. You're not going to write this whole romance novel, right? This is such a cool idea to summarize and just get the key points here. Like, you have the whole book down on this short piece of writing, and we don't need the whole 2 chapters of I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you. You get right to the good stuff.
Come on, you don't want the I love you, I
take some of them, but you know what I'm saying here? Like, I love your design to these pieces. Like, I'm going to summarize a novel idea and, develop these characters with Patsy.
Jim, don't forget Jim.
And the other interest who's...
And his teeth in a jar somewhere in the hospital,
So good. So that one, do you remember kind of formulating that one and kind of like,
Yeah, I think it was probably for a writers group.
yeah,
And I was just looking for something. And to tell you the truth, at my age, I sort of just, I think I got to write something. And then I think nothing is happening in my life.
right.
What am I going to write about? So I make something up.
Because
or-
this is every day with the journal. You say that every day. I want to write something, right?
Yeah, and I write things that are terribly boring. The only time that I am poignant is when something awful has happened to me.
Right.
Then I actually write interesting things. But otherwise, it was a quiet, dark morning. And boy, they all are these days.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little look at your material. So I know we have one more big piece where we're going to kind of change directions and go to, I think there are some nice levity moments in this, but it's a more serious one, really, really hit me hard. So we'll get to that. But let's talk a little more here in between, like a little halftime.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
You're listening to Seward Soundwords here on YouTube live stream at Sacktown channel here. We're going to be doing these radio shows, weekly shows. We're going to be having them on YouTube, simulcast, if you will. So new exciting piece here. Thanks again, Carol, for being our first guest on the video with the YouTube. So you made that great connection to pastels, right? With having a little yellow in the corner, and then you better work some in that does something for the eye.
Yes.
So I know pastel is very important to you. You've done it for a long time. I've seen your work. Fabulous. Gardening, of course. And then I want to talk about puzzles as well, because I've had some really great
Yes.
sits with you.
Mhm.
And so I'd like to kind of go through these. You did one with pastels, but I think you can do more as far as like how these other arts, hobbies connect to writing.
Mhm.
You could kind of pick it. Like, I feel like gardening is such, I could throw like, these are projects, right? And it's something that they give satisfaction. I need to write, right? I assume you would say the same. I need to garden.
I need to make money.
So,
I can give
That's
them a
not the
lot of
writing.
Social Security. But no, the writing definitely not.
right,
We only make enough to serve our just to pay for our habits.
right.
I started gardening mostly because I just grew too many things. A friend, Tai Long, taught me how to start plants. And it shouldn't have been any great surprise to me because my father was a truck farmer back in Indiana when I was a kid. And I certainly watched him garden. But I subsequently started way too many plants. And at first we started giving them to the local garden club for a sale. And then eventually I started my own business right around 2000. And there could be stories there too about there are a few jobs where there is rewarding as something like I do, because people come in and they're just so excited to buy things, to buy
Yeah.
vegetables, herbs, flowers, and they're just all a Twitter, and they pull out their phones now and they show me pictures, not their grandchildren, but their babies from last year,
Right.
little green babies.
Yeah.
And they go away happy, and you can't beat a better deal than that.
It is a fun shopping experience. I come every year with our kids, and it's just a blast.
When you ask me a question, I'll give you an answer.
Yeah.
And I probably will take you around the yard to see everything, that
Yeah.
I show you that you may not want to see.
Yep.
But
You're moving around a lot. There's a lot
Yeah,
going
and-
on.
When I think of myself, I think of the old blues song that says, "Don't get me talking. I'll tell you everything I know."
Right. But here
So
we are.
there
And
I am.
that's the whole point,
Yeah.
And it always is when I'm with you. And I think the point in life, right? When you're in a good conversation, keep it going, make time for it. So I like the starts, and we're going to hear about your father in the story you're going to read soon too.
Yeah.
So I like that touch you had there. But okay, like I'm kind of green with gardening. I'm trying more and more.
Well, green
Potatoes-
is the color you want.
Right. So starts. Can you give us a little, because I think there's a connection to writing here too. I'm going to throw out like indoors. Are we starting things now, or should we already by now? Can you give us a little starts?
I started late January. I started a couple of things. Chives, although
Yep.
they're not coming up very well. I'm getting a little nervous.
Okay.
But now I'm getting into more things. So I start them in little containers, spreading the seed. Then I go in later, and some call it worrying. The English, I
Oh.
think, call it pricking the seed out.
Uh-huh.
You take a little tool and lift out the plants, and then drop them in another container, and
you
so they
kinda
can
transfer
grow.
them there.
Yeah, you transplant.
That's got to be a sensitive kind of
It
surgical.
is. Well, some are and some aren't. God bless the viola. You can't kill a viola. They're wonderful to transplant. So if somebody wants
Okay.
to start, marigolds or violas are a great thing.
Okay.
And violas should have gone in probably a week to 2 weeks ago.
Go in. So I see like the egg carton. People use that. Is that, or like what are you
Well, some
putting?
people. It's what was it? It's a flat. It's this large container, and I'm trying to think.
Kind of
10
like what you'll put out in the
1040s
summer.
or 10. Yeah, like they are. And little containers that fit within that each one of those containers
Yeah.
has the spread seed.
Yeah.
Then when I take them out, one of those containers that is maybe 4 inches by 3 inches, or maybe it's a little bigger, could make maybe three flats of plants in 4-packs.
Gotcha.
And there's 12 4-packs to a flat.
So that's smaller. And
Yeah. So when you go out there, what you're going to get I'll start them in the basement, keep them in the basement. And then about the 1st of April, the basement will be full. So I will start moving the toughest ones out to the greenhouse,
Yeah.
the little heated greenhouse.
Yeah.
And then when that's full and the basement's full again, then I'll start taking the ones that can take a joke over to the other greenhouse that isn't heated. This is all going on in April.
Yeah.
And early May.
Yeah.
My plan every year, and it usually works, is that everything goes out on the tables in the weather before I open. And I usually am open the last weekend of May.
Yeah.
Because that's when the threat of frost is pretty much over.
Right.
So, but by the time you get my plants, they're ready to go in the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to harden them off.
So late May, that's your big push out of the basement to outside.
Oh, they're out of, yeah. Well, everything should be out of the
or in that
basement by
warm
then.
greenhouse.
But
and then-
I have these long 24-foot length of tables, like 5 rows.
Yeah.
And all the flats go on there. And then if it's cold if it's pretty cool in the at night, or there's windy during the day, I put row cover over, which is this gossamer like stuff that you lay over the top of everything.
Yeah.
And that protects it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, I think there's some writing connections here, right? Starts like it seems like you go from start to blossom very quickly with your writing. But I think a lot of writers, I know I will kind of hold on to ideas, get it started. I'm not ready to write, but let me keep feeding that, watering it, make notes, things like that. Is this making sense?
Well, for you it is.
Yeah, not for you.
No. If I made notes about it, I'd be looking at it 2 weeks later thinking, what the hell was that?
I love your style. Just get it done. That comes from, I think, all the practice and experience in life. Like you have these stories. You write a lot of nonfiction, which these, I guess, these are kind of a blend, actually.
That's the and somebody
and you shared a poem
once
recently too at workshop.
if you're going to tell somebody a lie or kid somebody in some way so that they believe you, the best thing to do is start out with something true.
Yeah.
So something they can relate to. And you say, that's so and so over there, and they go, yeah. Then you got them. See, now they're with you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I do here.
Nice. Some good tricks of the trade. Can we do a little puzzle talk here on Seward Soundwords too?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Because I've sat with you at the puzzle table, and I remember you right there. We spoke, and I was like, "Oh, you need to write this." Like just the concept of doing puzzle, maybe at the senior center, at any senior center, a kind of public puzzle, right? Anyone could come and visit, put a piece in. I think there's connections to writing there too, just like making a puzzle. Like here, the complete thing is kind of there for you on the box to kind of follow, but you need to find your way, and you make a little bit of progress. Like I put one piece in the other day, which
made you feel good.
Didn't
it?
Yeah. And our son, he was close. He was there.
Yeah.
But like people will come and visit, and there's puzzle talk, right? I don't know, connection to writing, or can we just get? I really like that.
I think we talked about when we were talking at the puzzle was that other people that I puzzle with, you don't realize you're talking. You're just working on a puzzle together.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a group. We can fit with that table against the wall. 3 people can puzzle at once.
Right.
And we sit together, and quite often the same people, and we understand each other. One of the people likes to hang on to the box to look at it for reference.
Right.
And he doesn't want to let it go.
Yeah.
So he
fair.
just sets it down next to him, and we all just fly blind.
Right.
You know, we're just putting pieces together. And then when one of the gals wants the puzzle, she just reaches her hand out, and he reaches down and hands it to her
Oh, that's
because
very
they
nice.
have
Yeah.
that understanding.
Right. I need the picture.
Yeah. So I think that, but they also talk about, like, I've sat with somebody that told me all about they were born and raised in Seward.
Cool.
So lots of stories.
Yeah. So
and
you
I,
can.
I thought about taking a tape recorder to get those stories, because this is somebody we should have his story down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I may not be the one, but
Right.
you know,
That type of talk, it's relaxed. You're doing something else and you get to talking. And then all of a sudden, here comes the goods. Here comes the story. So right there, a spoken story, you know, same as writing, that was found at the puzzle table.
Yeah. So stories could be created about the puzzle table. And I would start the story out with puzzle etiquette.
Yeah.
Because puzzle etiquette is important, because people just that don't do puzzles often don't realize, you know, if someone's doing the border, usually you let them have that border, because I know we've got one person who is the border person.
Right.
None of us will touch the border because we don't want to break that.
Right. They get that.
Yeah. And you don't reach over into someone else's pile and just grab pieces.
Right.
You ask, may I have that?
Yeah.
You don't take a piece and hold it over the puzzle with your arm dragging through everything, so that nobody else can put a piece in until you get and usually they don't get the piece in anyway.
Right.
So all these things are just little irritations. Yeah. And as soon as that extra person walks away, the three of us are probably saying, I just hate it when that happens.
So you don't say when they're there. It's kind
of course not, because you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Sure.
You just want to complain about them in private.
Right. That's all we want to do.
Well, and plus, when you say, can you believe they did that? Then that makes it even more obvious that you as an individual are caring enough not to do that. You know, it increases your image.
Don't any of you do that.
Yeah, not that you're doing that, you know.
Like it's a collaboration, the puzzle.
Oh, yeah. And then when it's done, there are some people, if you take it apart immediately, they're upset. It needs to sit there.
Right. And there is a little bit of a window there.
It needs to breathe a little there.
And
then we take it apart. Yeah, not right away. And some people like to take a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did this one. Is there a lead on a lot of these puzzles where, you know, it's not competitive, right? I mean, the person holding the pieces, it's like, or is it like, does one person sometimes do most of a puzzle? Like, I'm sure there's puzzles where
depends on who's there.
Right. It's all about the day.
There's two other people that do when they're here in town, they do a lot. They'll do a puzzle in a day.
Yeah.
If I'm there, that's fine. If I'm not, you know, they just continue on. Yeah. One of the things that's kind of cute is the guy who does the border, and he, you know, everything. He only likes to do a puzzle once. So when we get a puzzle done, he puts his initials up in the left-hand corner of the box, so that anyone going to You Can Use It doesn't bring back a used puzzle that we've already done. And if there's a piece missing, he marks it on the box where the missing piece is. I've seen that. And so it's like one piece missing. He's very definite about that. We even have some glue sticks sitting there to repair. Yeah.
It's serious stuff.
Yes. And this guy who's that serious about it is somebody who I've known for many years as was a loader operator and stuff, but you wouldn't think would like puzzles.
Right.
But now that he's retired, he really enjoys it, and he's good at it.
Although loader operating can kind of be a bit of a Tetris, right? Making things kind of fit there. I mean, I see with writing, I see progress, because you will, you know, with your writing, you sit and it's written one sit. But do you get up from the puzzle table before it's complete? I mean, you have to. It's lunchtime. You got pastel class. Like a puzzle will sit kind of being worked on for several days sometimes, some of these big.
When I was a kid, I always wanted to put in the last piece.
Sure.
And I don't know how old I was when it suddenly dawned on me, because my dad and I would do puzzles together when I was a kid. And it dawned on me one day, you know, if I stick one piece in my pocket, it's always going to be the last piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he knew I was doing it, but he never stopped me.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't care about the last piece now. I got all my last pieces a long time ago.
Well, thank you for sharing about puzzling. Very interesting to me. And I think viewers and listeners, I think you might have just heard, you know, that's a Carol Souza piece kind of right there. Puzzle etiquette. Those are sentences she said could go right on the page and be entertaining, certainly in my opinion. I think I got a lot of people with me. You brought it back to your dad here with this lovely little anecdote of you hanging on to the last piece of the puzzle, and he doesn't care. You're going to have the last piece anyway. So I think now we can move to this final piece, which is longer, and you can introduce a little bit. This is Seward Soundwords here on at Sacktown YouTube's channel, live stream, and also on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. Thank you all so much for listening. And Carol, thank you for bringing your wonderful words to share with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this one was done in 2012. I was looking through old photographs, not just my old photographs, but my family's old photographs. And just thinking about how, how photographs can tell you a story. And sometimes the story is more than you expect.
Yeah.
And sometimes looking at photographs is a story.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's called The Old Photos, Old Memories. The trouble with old photographs is they often outlive us. Once we are gone, they become little mysteries without clues. Faces stare out unrecognized, unreferenced, to those who look at them one at a time, taken from an old dresser drawer, a family album. One day, all of us will become the unrecognized images, after everyone who loves us and hated us is long dead and gone. It was this reason that I sat one night with my mother and looked through the old photos. She had given them to me, knowing I would become their keeper, their guardian. As my mother was in her late 80s, many of the pictures were quite old, and I knew that once mother was gone, so would be the identity of those in the photos. No other family members from her youth were alive to smile over these memories. She was the last. My plan was to put the pictures in albums, arranging them chronologically, each photo with a caption. I needed to know who and when, and often what occasioned the photo. In those days, formal pictures required sittings, and even casual snapshots required some planning. Photos were taken on vacations, holidays, and special events. Among my mother's photos, there were a few impromptu shots. The earliest photos were taken around 1910 and the newest in 1960s. I had traveled from Alaska to Washington State to see my mother and brother. They'd lived together for years, settled in like an old couple, as such arrangements often seem. My brother had gone across town to visit my oldest brother in the hospital. Not long after I'd arrived for this visit, he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, the second son my mother was going to outlive. These two brothers were siblings, separated by 2 years, toddlers when my father married my mother. They had a son after their marriage, my older brother, and he died at age 21. So on this night, my mother and I sat alone together at the kitchen table, sorting through memories, cataloging them. My mother was extremely patient with my questions, and she answered quite clear. Few facts escaped her after all these years. Perhaps the past held less pain than the present. We began with her childhood on the family farm in northern Indiana. She was raised less than 50 miles from the home in which she raised me. She told me they lived a good life on the farm and made many trips to Florida on vacation. In those days, she said, there were only dirt roads with occasional roadhouses. She said her mother was so terrified of riding in the car over the mountains, she got out and walked. We found a picture of my grandparents holding up a fish in front of the family car. It must have been taken in the early 1920s. We looked at many pictures of mother and her siblings on the farm on vacation. But sometime in her teens, her family moved from the farm. She said she was surprised to find that her parents did not own the farm, but merely ran it for mother's relatives. They moved into the nearest town, and my grandfather, an accomplished carpenter, built a large home there. Mother said she went to work for the local utility company while her older sister became a seamstress. At some point, my aunt took a job in Florida working for the Garment Makers Union. Mother held a picture of my smiling aunt and a round old little man in a white linen suit and a Panama hat. They looked very much like a couple. Mother offered no explanation, but said my aunt was drawn to men who didn't have her best interests at heart. She liked the handsome fellows who were a bit exciting. As far as I could see, she made an exception with this fellow. She told me she had gone to Florida to work with her sister and experienced a terrible hurricane while there. I asked her about my older brothers. Had they gone with her? She said they had. She told me they all returned to Indiana eventually, and she set up housekeeping with my aunt. When my aunt married, Mother and the boys moved into a boarding house run by an old Russian woman. That was where she met my father. When I was a child, I recall people asking my dad where he met my mother. He always told him she was picking up horse turds for Mrs. Matusik's garden, and apparently that's exactly what she was doing. But she was not pleased to have that information shared with others. A truck farmer, he immediately saw a hard-working woman, unafraid to see the potential of animal excrement. He romanced her and charmed her with his attention to her young sons, and once again, as a farmer, I'm sure he saw the potential of 2 strapping boys to help with chores. There were pictures of my mother and father on a date in the Dune State Park, of their home in the suburbs of Gary, later photos of my brother in their teen years, cutting firewood with my dad. Next came photos of their first baby, my brother, then me, both chubby babies of the day. Then a shot of the 2 of us together, my brother at 5 and me not yet a year old. By the time I had reached 2 or 3, we moved to a farm some 30 miles from Gary, the city where I was born. My father moved a house in 2 sections on the 38 acres. There is a picture in which I'm standing in a wheelbarrow looking up at my dad as if he were the sun and the moon, and of course he was. I lived there to see my eldest brother enlist in the Air Force and move to Washington. The next brother drafted into the Army, and my sibling died in an automobile accident at 21. There were many pictures of the farm, and one of my eldest brother in his Air Force uniform, home for a visit, standing next to my dad as he worked in his garden. My dad died of cancer in his early 70s, but my mother and brother lived on in that house on the farm for many years, long after my marriage to my sweet childhood sweetheart, the birth of my 2 sons, and our move to Alaska. It was getting late in the evening, and I knew my mother was tired, so I reviewed the chronological information I had written. There was a black hole in the timeline from the time my mother worked at the utility company until she moved to Florida. This should come as no surprise to me. The void has always been there. Any history on the subject had been skirted and ambiguous as long as I can remember. Even my oldest brothers had no idea who their father was. It was my impression that the marriage had ended badly, but I decided it was time to ask before the story was lost forever. I took a breath and I asked her, "What about the boy's father? When did you marry him?" In a steady voice, she said, "We were not married." There it was, the family secret, my mother's great shame, sitting among the pictures on the kitchen table. Of course, in this day and age, such a thing is less shocking, but in her youth, it was tragic. She was a fallen woman. One could marry badly, one could get married pregnant, but one must marry. I tried to sound casual, afraid she would feel some real judgment in my voice. I asked, "Who was he?" This was perhaps the real question, the question I never asked, the question I'll never ask in all those years. She said, "He was my boss at the utility company." "Why didn't you marry?" I asked. She said, "He was already married." "Was he the father of both boys?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Of course, the next question was one I could not ask. It'd be too judgmental, too accusatory. Why would a young woman in that era give birth to 2 illegitimate children by the same married father in a small town? I did ask her what happened to the relationship. She told me that his wife overlooked the first baby, or at least came to terms with it, but the second child was intolerable. My mother no longer worked for the utility company, and during her second pregnancy, her family took her to an unwed mother's home in southern Indiana. After the birth of the second son, she returned home, then to Florida to live with her sister. My chronological list was complete. We talked on about other less sensitive events. Soon after, my mother left the table and went off to bed. As I put the pictures back in the box, I wondered why my mother had answered me so honestly after all the years of unspoken questions. Had she finally felt the need to unburden herself, or had someone finally asked? I lay awake quite a while that night on my mother's couch, sorting it all out. I remembered an incident from childhood when I asked why unmarried ladies didn't have babies, and she replied, "Sometimes they do." Even as a child, I knew the tone of the reply inferred no follow up questions were welcome. I remembered also, at 18, coming home to my mother with the news that I was pregnant, watching the sadness in her eyes, but not the least hint of judgment. Now I knew she had been in my shoes long ago, at a time when judgment surely abounded. The fact that her family did not disown her or denounce her speaks well of them. The next day, my brother drove me to the local airport to catch a shuttle flight to Seattle, where I would board a plane to return to Alaska. Mom and I had said our goodbyes at that same kitchen table, then again at the door, where she watched us drive away. It was a short drive to the airport, and we were early, so we sat down in the snack shop for a cup of coffee. As we sat there, I considered if I should speak to my brother about what my mother had told me. If it were me, I'd want to know, but he might feel differently. I asked him, "Has mother ever talked to you about your real father?" "No," he said. "We once saw a name on a document, but she didn't talk about it." "Would you like to know?" I asked. I saw hesitation in his eyes. I wondered if I'd made an error in judgment, but the question dangled in the air like a live wire. I explained what Mom had told me, and he said it made sense that it happened that way. He said my father offered to adopt them, but he wanted to wait until they were old enough to decide for themselves. He adopted them as adolescents, and to my recollection, they were never considered adopted or half-brothers. My brother told me my father was his father, and that was good enough for him. However, he expressed disappointment in my mother for her loose ways. It surprised me. As we sat there, back in their home, sat my mother in her 80s. She was probably preparing my brother's lunch, as she had been doing for the last 50 years or more. Our mother loved her children, and when my brothers were born, she kept them with her, raised them alone until my father saw the potential, saw that in his 40s, a ready-made family. In a time of plenty, it would be easy to judge a young woman in the Depression era, working a job not easily replaced, no doubt taking home money to her mother and father, living in an apartment provided by her boss or keeper. I don't know if she loved the man, had hopes. She may have been young and foolish, but smart enough to know that leaving him meant leaving her means to make a living. How does one measure virtue? How does one judge the passions of fear or the foolishness of a woman 50 years in the past, marked only by the silence of a family and the lack of photos for that era? I'm sure once my brother said his goodbyes to me and returned home, he sat down to lunch and it was not discussed. I doubt it ever was. And I'm sure in a very short time, my brother relinquished his judgment of our mother's behavior so long ago. As for me, it drew me closer. It is so easy when young to believe our parents never felt as we feel, did what we do, yearn for more. Having reached my 40s, I could look back at my own life and see my mother as a woman, not unlike myself, coping with choices we've made, living with what is delivered to us. Her confession pulled me closer into my heart. My mother died at 92, not long after her death. I made a photo album of some of her old photos. I took it to a Mother's Day breakfast, passed it around, introducing people to my mother. As I sit here writing, across the room is a photo of my mother standing in frame on my dresser. She holds one of my brothers standing on her lap. Her young eyes look out at me, filled with hope and love for her child, and ready to raise her family, come what may. And she did, bless her heart.
Thanks for sharing that one. That would be all right, and I will. But that one is, wow. I mean,
yeah, it was an experience. It was a definite experience, and it's yeah. I can share that story because everybody in it is dead but me.
Right. Was that one written in one sit? I mean, that's a complex piece. It's longer. There's a lot going. It's
all one. No, just one sit down.
Yeah.
There may be something I change. I I might have gone along and said, well, no, that's out of place there, and cut and paste it and move it to a
Okay.
different spot or something. Grammatical errors and
So
I mean,
a little bit of drafting, but the whole
Oh, yeah.
story was
I mean,
down in one
yeah.
go. Like that's
yeah,
how you do it.
that's the story. Well, it was in my heart at that moment
Right.
because I was thinking about my mother and having looked through those pictures and
Yeah,
so and you look through the pictures. I mean, they're
Yeah.
old. That one of my mother in the chair is 1909.
So that's her there. I was looking for the one of you and the wheelbarrow. 'Cause
Oh,
I've
it's
seen that
in
one.
there.
Oh, is
Yeah.
it?
It's not very big. Right there.
Oh yeah, I did have that one up. I mean, that's just you talk about a family story. I just think you can't do it any better. I mean, that story is just loaded, and you're patient. I mean, if you're up for going back to those moments where you're sitting with, I love the design. It's all set up. You're
Yeah.
looking at photos with your mom,
Mhm.
and then you go back into the history of where these photos take you, those stories, and we kind of leave the present with your mom. I love that line that the past held less pain than the present. You're kind of guessing at what a line.
Well, especially that was true enough because, like I say, when I got there, my oldest brother, who is like 15 years my senior.
Right.
His brother was 12 years my senior, and they were very close, 2 years apart.
Right.
And my oldest brother got sick just before I got there, and they
Right.
diagnosed him with cancer, and he wasn't going to last long. So my second brother was going to see him at the hospital,
Right.
and that's what left me and my mother there at the table.
Right.
And I'm
Just a loaded time.
yeah, and I was going to take these pictures home with me, and I thought, I don't know these people.
Right.
I know kind of,
Yeah.
but that's why I wanted this chronological order
Yeah.
so I could put them in an album. But then there was this spot, this space.
Right.
And isn't that funny that we never really asked her?
Right.
So the question is,
Yeah.
would she have told us?
Right. You have
Had we
that
asked
line.
her?
Like, was it just silent? Like, was just us not asking? Did she
Yeah.
want to unburden herself, or was she just would have unburdened herself anytime? No one ever asked.
Yeah, no one ever asked, and yeah, it was interesting, and I think maybe part of the reason that she told me was that this was probably the last opportunity to tell anybody.
Yep.
And my brother's reaction was kind of surprising
Yeah.
that he, because I would be very curious
Sure.
to know who that
And he
man
was kind of like, yeah, sure.
well,
you want
because
some?"
it wasn't she wasn't a married lady,
Right.
So I think that
But she wanted that family story to go down like that, because, that's okay. And this was us. And how you ended. Like she raised her family beautifully and with all her might, no matter what, and then this is an okay way to do it. This is how I did it.
yeah,
For everyone to know, their history. That's important. She wanted to give that to you guys.
Yeah.
And your brothers.
yeah, and she did. She was a good mama,
So, yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like those moments, like, do I ask my mom? Like, you were going to ask her, and do I ask my brother? It sounds like you sat there a little bit and then considering, like, yes.
I'm just looking at this spot.
Yep.
And I thought I got to ask.
Right.
So I just asked like it wasn't a big deal.
Right. I
And
like
she
that.
just
Yeah.
answered it
Like it wasn't a big deal.
like
yeah.
it wasn't a big
Yeah.
deal.
She just, yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? That's probably one of the most impressive times I've been around my mother, where I was adult to adult, not looking at her like my mommy,
Right.
where I looked at her and I thought, boy, we're connecting here.
Yep.
Yeah. we're
Yeah.
connecting.
As you close
Yeah.
the piece, it gave
But
you
bless
her
her heart that
confession
she
pulled
told
you
me.
closer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that line you get to at the end too, is, thinking our parents never felt as we do, for us to think that like we are, we're like our parents. They were young too. They had these experiences. I
Yeah.
love that connection there, because you have this view of your parents, but they were teenagers and didn't have kids at times, and just so many nice moments that I think any reader, can connect to. And folks, I think you see Carol Souza's range here as she, hits us with the comedy and the imagination with fake news at the senior center, and the pumper truck coming by, and then this really kind of heartfelt piece about her family. So thanks for sharing those pieces.
Sure.
At the
I
end of the
appreciate
show, which we're nearing, Wolf's back. Thank you, Wolf, for tonight. Congratulations. First YouTube live stream,
Yeah.
of Seward Soundwords.
Yeah. You guys are naturals.
Yeah, well, it's Carol, You got to have the whole show more often, not just close. But I like to ask the guest, and I'd love to have you on back again. You showed
You want me?
back on the show.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Okay.
Go ahead.
She appreciates it.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to have to
so
go back on the
much.
tape on that one. I like to ask the guest if there is
Well,
anything else they'd like to share with our listeners, like about writing or anything at all. You got the town's year right now. I mean, everybody's on this
Oh
one.
boy, I don't know. Any resemblance to any living person is entirely coincidental, more or less. Unless you're dead, then it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know what to tell anybody. I'm 76 now, so I've had a lot of years to remember things, to think about things. And when you reach my age, you can say anything you want.
Right.
I'm a cute little old lady.
Yeah. You can get
I
away
can
with
look
it.
at this. Get this look. Sweet, isn't it? Yeah. I never
So-
get a ticket. Yeah. So you can do those things. You can be crusty,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
You should be.
So just remember, everybody, just get old.
Right. And then you'll be
That's
a great
where
writer.
it's at. Yeah.
Because the thing is time. And, I have the honor, I'd say, of having that senior writers group and sitting with a lot of seniors who have the life experience and have the writing. And it seems like a lot of you do go just sit down and write it. And it's like, it's ready.
Yeah. We haven't got a lot of time for research.
Right.
We just got to
It's
get it
already
down
done.
there.
It's already
Got to get it
done.
down there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing tonight. And I am going to get to a pastel class soon. And of course, we got writers group on Wednesday. A whole lot going on in the writing realm here in Seward. I will put in a quick plug for an event at Res Art coming up on Thursday. Shauna Pataki's debut poetry collection from Cirque Press, Yosemite Dawning, is the launch of that. So I encourage
Give a date since this may not air.
tonight.
For the
Oh, yeah.
reading.
Yeah, so that's
what's-
March 2nd on
Okay.
Thursday. Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because we'll run this Wees and Greens Evergreen. Right, so-
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I
on
think,
91.7 KIBH FM Seward.
and just spitballing here, I think
Yeah.
we'll probably start actually airing this at 6 on Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
So we'll record the Monday. We'll do the Monday thing. But
Okay,
yeah.
that sounds
But
good.
because, city business keeps getting in our way.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Or we, yeah, because that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like right here live, we're deciding we're going to a new airing night of Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Which works great.
Yeah.
Get your week started. And,
Well, and you
get
can always-
through Monday.
well, you
got
can
Seward
catch it-
Soundwords on Tuesday.
You can catch it early on YouTube.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll run the live on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
because I like the live.
Mhm.
Yeah, keep that rolling.
Yeah.
Cool. 2 nights, Seward Soundwords.
Mhm.
Love it. Oh, you missed the show. Well, it's
Yeah.
on tonight. It's on tomorrow.
Well, for those of you on YouTube, I don't know why, Zoom meetings or anything, I just look like a white ghost. I look like the Michelin Man.
We got a lot.
I
Well,
do. I don't know what it is. I always look really white.
we need a
Time-
we need a makeup chair,
That's it.
and
That's
we
it.
need better lighting.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
bronzing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys, when you guys hit the table,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
that's okay. You'll hear when
Yeah.
you hear the playback.
I think for a first
Next
go,
time,
I'm not looking
we
at
need-
myself because,
Well,
but I think for a first go, I think
yeah, there's mechanical aspects that need to be worked on. Like
Yeah.
we need to get isolating mounts for the Mac microphones, and
Sure.
we'll get there.
That's
Yeah,
your
yeah, we'll get there.
your field.
Yeah,
But we, that's how we do it over here.
And,
We make the show.
they like
the
to say,
updates.
"Yep." They like to say, "We'll fix it in post." But
Yeah.
if I said that tonight, I'd be lying. This is what you get.
Yeah.
Seward Soundwords, KIBH FM Seward, and our channel on Facebook, YouTube, but Facebook also is facebook.com/Seward Public. And I think we have the @Sacktown. I'm a little hazy on that YouTube side of things. So check
Okay.
out our Facebook page, check out our website at
Okay.
sewardpublic.org, and we'll get the YouTube thing dialed in.
Awesome. Thanks, Wolf. Thanks, Carol. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
so much. Really appreciate it.
And I'm going to end the stream now.
We're gone.
End.